The first thing to burn was the sign. It did not catch fire on its own. It was lit by the order of a man who, in all of his 34 years of life, had never once been told that something was not his to take. The flame moved from the painted wood to the window frame, from the window frame to the curtains, from the curtains to everything inside that had taken a woman 3 years of her life to build. A clay pot her mother shipped from Lagos. Gone. The framed photograph of opening day, still hanging slightly crooked above the counter because she had never gotten around to straightening it. Gone. The handwritten menu board in her careful script, Seoul Kitchen, with the small Korean characters she had learned just to honor the neighborhood, curling at its edges, then black, then nothing. 4 men in dark coats stood in the alley across the street. Not one of them moved, and Amanda did not run. She stood in the doorway of her burning shop. Blue dress, white apron already gray, with ash, with both arms slightly out from her sides, her feet planted on the threshold like a woman who had decided, in some place deeper than thought, that she would not be moved from this spot. Not by the heat at her back, not by the smoke thickening around her shoulders, not by the man standing 10 feet away in a suit so perfectly black it made the night around him look informal. Kang-chi looked at her. She looked back. He had seen many things in the eyes of people who stood before him. Fear was the most common. Calculation came second. Occasionally, in men who did not yet understand what they were dealing with, he saw defiance. The brittle, shaking kind that always broke before long. He knew how to read every version of every expression a person could wear when they realized who he was. What he saw in Amanda's eyes was none of those things. It was older than fear, quieter than defiance. It was the look of a woman protecting something so much more important than herself, that her own safety had simply stopped being part of the calculation. He stepped forward. She did not move. He took another step. The heat from the doorway behind her was visible now, orange light rippling at the edges of her silhouette, ash floating upward around her like slow snow. And still she did not move, did not flinch, did not drop her eyes from his for even half a second. "There is no one in there," Kang-chi said. His voice was the kind that did not need to be raised to fill a space. "Step aside." "You are wrong," she said. 3 words. Quiet as a closed door. He stopped. And then he heard it. From somewhere behind her. Somewhere inside the smoke and the heat and the wreckage of everything she had built. A sound so small it should not have reached him. Should not have cut through the growl of the fire and the distant noise of the city and the practiced coldness of 34 years spent not being touched by anything. A child, crying, not screaming, not calling for help. The soft, exhausted, heartbroken crying of a very small person who does not fully understand what is happening but understands, with the perfect animal instinct of the very young, that something is terribly wrong. Kang-chi went still. In all of his years, through every confrontation, every negotiation conducted at the edge of a knife, every morning he had woken up and chosen again to be the man he had become. Nothing had ever made him go still the way that sound did. He did not know why. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself it was irrelevant. He told himself that whatever was behind that door was not his concern, that obstacles came in many forms, that he had not built what he had built by hesitating over sounds in burning buildings. He turned. He walked away. His men fell into step behind him without a word. He did not look back. He would tell himself, later that night, in the silence of his apartment, that he had simply recalculated. That the property dispute could be resolved through other means. That the woman with the ash on her apron and the fire at her back was a minor complication, nothing more. He was lying to himself. Because the sound of that child would follow him through every room of that apartment and into his sleep. And 3 days later, when Dojin placed a file on his desk and said, carefully, in the voice he used when information required careful handling, "Boss, the woman. We found something about the child." Kang-chi would look at the photograph in that file and feel the ground shift beneath everything he believed about his own life. The child's name was Hana. She was 2 years old, and she had his eyes. Subscribe to see how this unfolds. And comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. The door of the SUV slammed shut. The city outside went quiet behind the glass. Kang-chi sat with his hands on his thighs and his eyes straight. Ahead. He wasn't seeing anything. Dojin was in the front seat. Neither of them spoke. 4 minutes passed. The Baek Syndicate moved 2 more men into the Northern District this afternoon. Dojin said, "If we lose another month on the Mapo block." "I know the timeline." Silence again. Here is what Dojin understood about his boss. The stillness was never neutral. The stillness was where decisions lived. And right now, something in that stillness was different. Tighter. Like a wire pulled one turn past where it was supposed to go. "She's refused every offer," Dojin said. 8 months, she didn't negotiate once. Kang-chi said nothing. "She's the last holdout on the entire block. Every other owner signed within 6 weeks." Still nothing. The car moved through 2 intersections. Then Kang-chi said, "Find everything on her. Where she came from, how she paid for the property, who the child belongs to. Of course. Tonight." He told himself she was a minor obstacle. Stubborn woman with a small shop and a borrowed lawyer. He had resolved things far bigger than Amanda. He would resolve this. He almost believed it. But the sound wouldn't leave him. That small, exhausted crying from somewhere inside the smoke. He pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose and looked at the city moving past the window and told himself it meant nothing. He was still telling himself that at 3 in the morning when sleep hadn't come. The ash was still warm when Amanda walked back into what was left of her shop. She moved carefully, testing each step before putting her weight down. Hana was on her hip, dark-eyed, heavier than usual the way children go heavy after crying, her small fingers twisted into the fabric of Amanda's dress. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just looking at everything with the quiet of a child who doesn't have words for what she's seeing. "Toki," Hana said. Not a question. A fact. Something important was missing and she needed it acknowledged. "I know," Amanda said. "Hold on." She moved deeper into the wreckage, past the counter. Old solid oak, still standing, her mother's insistence when they built it. You build it to last or you don't build it at all. Behind it, wedged in the corner where Hana always left him before climbing the stool to watch her cook, was Toki. The rabbit's ears were singed, one button eye had melted at the edge, but he was there. Amanda picked him up the way you pick up something living. She held him out. Hana reached with both hands, pulled him to her chest, said nothing. Because sometimes 2-year-olds understand things more completely than words can carry. "See?" Amanda said quietly. "Still here." She stood in the middle of what was left of Seoul Kitchen and she looked at all of it. The clay pot her mother shipped from Lagos. Gone. The opening day photograph, still slightly crooked because she'd never gotten around to straightening it. Gone. The handwritten menu board. She'd painted herself because she was a better cook than an artist. Gone. She looked at everything until she understood exactly what was lost. She had learned, the hard way, more than once, that the people who looked away too fast always stumbled over the loss later in the dark. She looked. She understood. She began to move. 2 calls from the alley outside, Hana still on her hip, and Toki crushed between them. First call, Celine, who asked nothing and said, "Come now, the room's ready." Second call, a lawyer. Sharper than the one who'd been fielding the offer letters. The kind with experience in the kind of trouble she could now see coming toward her like headlights in the rain. She didn't cry. She packed what was left. But as she was walking out, Hana against her shoulder, one bag over her arm, Toki tucked under Hana's elbow. She stopped for a moment in the doorway. The same doorway. She looked back at the shop one more time. Then she walked out into the night, the call. File landed on the desk the next morning. Dojin stood back the way he stood when information required careful handling. Amanda Osei Mensah, 29, born in London, raised partly in Lagos. Culinary scholarship brought her here 6 years ago. She stayed. Opened Soul Kitchen 3 years ago. Self-funded. Small private loan from an aunt. No criminal record, no debt, no affiliations. Kang Chi turned pages. One flag. He looked up. She was close to a woman named Sarah Yoon. Dojin said it carefully, the way you say a name when you're not sure what it will do to the room. Deceased. 2 years ago. Car accident. March 14th. Around 11 at night. Kang Chi stopped turning pages. The room was very quiet. Sarah. He'd said her name to himself twice in 2 years. Both times in the dark. Both times with the specific confusion of a man trying to understand how someone could be in his life, and then simply not be. No fight, no scene, no message. She had disappeared. He had looked quietly through channels that could find almost anyone. He'd found nothing, because she was already gone. He hadn't known. The child, he said. His voice was level, completely level. Tell me. 2 years old. Birth certificate lists Sarah Yoon as the mother. Dojin paused. Father's line is blank. Kang Chi looked at the photograph of Hana in the file. Taken from a distance. A park somewhere. The child's face turned slightly toward the camera without knowing it was there. He looked at the line of her jaw. The way her eyes were set. The angle of her brow when she was looking at something that interested her. He knew that angle. Find them, he said. Dojin reached for the file. Dojin. He stopped. Today. Dojin looked at him. At the face that hadn't changed, the voice that hadn't shifted. Everything about Kang Chi that was exactly as it always was, and saw, underneath all of it, something that had no name in the vocabulary of their work together. Yes, boss, he said, and left. Amanda hadn't survived 2 years by being careless. She moved Hana to Celine's apartment that same night, gone by morning, before the city was fully awake. New phone, new routes. She was methodical about it. Sarah had taught her. Always think 3 moves forward. Always know your exits. Always make Hana the hardest thing to find. She believed the space she'd created would hold. It didn't. 4 days. That's how long it took Kang Chi's network to pull together enough small, individually meaningless details to draw a straight line to Celine's front door. She looked through the peephole and saw him standing in the hallway. Just him. No one else. Dark jacket, hands at his sides, standing in the ordinary light of the corridor like a man who had simply arrived somewhere and was willing to wait. She hadn't planned for this version. She'd planned for the men, the cars, the performance of power. Not one quiet knock at a normal hour. She opened the door, stepped through it, pulled it shut behind her. She's sleeping, Amanda said. You won't wake her. He looked at her. She looked back. The hallway was narrow and plain, and nothing about it was dramatic except the 2 people standing in it. I know who her mother was, he said. Amanda said nothing. I need to see her. Not yet. She held his eyes. Not like this. Something crossed his face. Fast. Gone before it fully arrived. I'm not asking, he said. I know you're not, Amanda said. I'm telling you anyway. She didn't step back. You came alone. That means part of you already knows this isn't that kind of conversation. Don't make it one. A long moment. From behind the door, nothing. Hana was still asleep, Taki folded in her arms the way she always slept. Kang Chi looked at the closed door, then at Amanda. Then what kind is it? The kind where you sit down, she said. And we talk about Sarah. The kitchen table was small. His presence at it made the whole room feel different. Like furniture rearranged overnight and you can't quite name what moved. He sat with his jacket on, hands flat on the table. Amanda put the kettle on because it gave her hands something to do, while she decided what to say first and how much of it he'd earned. She set the tea down. Neither of them touched it. "We met at the culinary school," Amanda said. She wasn't a student. She worked in the front office. We both took our breaks in the same courtyard. 4 years before she told me anything about you. What did she tell you? Enough? She looked at him steadily. She loved you. I want you to know that first, because what comes next might not feel like it. He absorbed this without moving. Tell me about the accident. March, 2 years ago. She'd just gotten good results from a hospital appointment. She called me from the car on the way back. She sounded like herself. Really like herself, for the first time in weeks. Amanda's hands rested on the table. The other driver ran a light. Her car hit the barrier on the bridge. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. Silence. Hannah had been at my apartment for 3 days while Sarah went to the appointments. I had her when the call came. He didn't move, didn't speak. I had her, Amanda said again, quietly. And then I had to decide what that meant. The clock on the wall moved through a significant amount of silence. Then he said, "Did she say anything? About me? Before she died?" Amanda looked at him for a long time. She looked at the hands flat on the table, the jacket still on. The structure of a man who had spent 34 years making sure nothing could reach him. And she thought about what Sarah had said in those last weeks, talking about him the way people talk about places they've loved and left and can't go back to. "She said you weren't ready," Amanda said. The words landed. She watched them land. He sat with it. He didn't fight it. He didn't explain it away. He just sat with it. The way you sit with something that is true, which is heavily and without much movement. "And now?" he said. Amanda stood, picked up both cups, still full, carried them to the sink. She stood with her back to him and looked out the small window at the pale morning light on the street below. "I'm still deciding," she said. She heard him push back from the table. "Stand." "She left something," Amanda said, before he reached the door. "Sarah did. A letter. Sealed. She said to open it only if you found us." She paused. "You're not ready to hear it yet, but I want you to know it exists." Footsteps stopped. "How will you know?" he said. "When I'm ready." Amanda turned and looked at him standing in the kitchen doorway, the dark jacket, the tattoo just visible above the collar, the face that had held its mask through everything she'd just said, except for one moment. One single moment when she told him what Sarah said, and something behind his eyes had moved like weight shifting deep underwater. "The same way Sarah knew," Amanda said. "I'll be watching." He left. The door closed. From the back room came the soft sound of Hannah waking. Small movements, a sleepy murmur, the specific noise of a 2-year-old gathering herself back from sleep. Amanda pressed one hand over her eyes for 3 seconds. Then she pushed off the counter and went to get her daughter ready for the day. She set her conditions on a Tuesday morning. Same small table, same untouched tea. No men outside, no surveillance. No one from his organization knowing the address except Dojin. 1 hour maximum. If Hannah got tired or upset, the visit ended without discussion. If Amanda said stop, he stopped. She laid all of it out without apology. He agreed to every condition without negotiating a single one. That surprised her more than resistance would have. She went to get Hannah. She came back with the child on her hip and Toki under one small arm. Hannah was in the pink coat she insisted on wearing regardless of weather. She looked at the stranger in the kitchen with the complete unself-conscious focus of a 2-year-old who hasn't learned yet that staring is something you're supposed to manage. Kang Chi was standing. He looked at Hannah and something happened to his stillness. It didn't soften. It didn't break. But it changed. The way held breath is different from ordinary breathing. Amanda set Hannah down and said nothing. Hannah stood with Toki and studied him. Then she tilted her head 11 degrees to the left. The angle she always used when she was trying to figure something out. Kang Chi watched her do it, and something moved across his face that Amanda hadn't seen there before. He crouched down to her level. Amanda hadn't expected that. She'd expected him to look down at the child from the full height of himself. Instead, he folded himself down until his eyes were at Hana's height and rested his arms on his knees and waited. Hana walked toward him, stopped when she was close enough that she had to look up only slightly, studied him, then held up the rabbit. "Toki is hurt," she said. The way a doctor delivers a diagnosis. Factual, important, requiring acknowledgement. Kang Chi looked at the singed ears, the melted eye. He looked at them longer than the observation needed. "I see that," he said. "He got hurt in the fire," Hana said. "Amanda said he's still here, but his ears are funny now." "They are. Can you fix him?" A beat. Then, "I'll get her a new one," Amanda said. "She doesn't want a new one, she wants this one fixed." He looked up at her. She held his gaze and let the sentence do its work. Not just the words, what was underneath them. That some things can't be replaced. That the answer to something broken isn't to throw it away and start over. That this was true of rabbits, and it was true of other things, and he was standing in the middle of one of those other things right now. He looked at her for a moment, then back at Hana. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll have him fixed." Hana pulled the rabbit back and examined him, checking that this promise had registered with Toki directly. Satisfied, she turned and walked to her chair and began rearranging the objects on the table with the focused energy of someone with important organizational work ahead. Kang Chi stayed crouched for a moment longer. Then he straightened slowly and stood in the borrowed kitchen and watched his daughter's back. Amanda watched him do it, and said nothing, because some moments only need a witness. The anomaly appeared 9 days later, buried in a procurement chain that shouldn't have required Dojin's personal attention. He found it by looking at what wasn't there. A redirect in the project's block-by-block acquisition sequence, filed at mid-level. No higher authorization. It had moved the priority targeting from the northern end of the Mapo block to the southern end, to Amanda's address. Specifically, filed 8 months ago, 2 weeks before the first offer letter went out. Park Junho's signature was at the bottom. Dojin sat with this for an hour before he brought it to Kang Chi. He used the hour to pull the thread backward. The further back it went, the quieter the hour became. Junho had been running private surveillance on Sarah Yoon's personal connections for 14 months before her death. No authorization, no documentation in any official channel. Billed through a contractor the syndicate used for sensitive work. Buried in a discretionary account that moved too much money in too many directions for any single line item to get noticed. The monitoring had shifted after Sarah died, focused on the people close to her, then narrowed, over time, to one person. Amanda. Junho had known about Hana for at least 18 months. He'd known, said nothing. And then he'd steered a billion-dollar expansion project like a slow ship toward a single small building on a southern block and waited to see what would happen. 2 possible outcomes a man in his position might have been hoping for. Amanda takes the money and disappears. She and the child gone permanently, problem solved. Or she refuses. Things escalate. And the escalation becomes leverage. A secret child, unknown and unacknowledged, used against Kang Chi at the moment of maximum exposure. Dojin brought the file to Kang Chi on a Wednesday evening and set it on the desk and stepped back. Kang Chi read it once. Then from the beginning again, more slowly. He looked at the redirect signature, the surveillance billing, the timeline laid against Amanda's address, against Hana's age, against the date of the first offer letter. He closed the file, hands flat on the desk, eyes on the middle distance. Very, very still. Not the ordinary stillness of his composure. Something deeper. The stillness of a man who has already decided and is now simply on the other side of it. "Leave it with me," he said. Boss. Leave it with me, Dojin. What followed, Amanda learned in fragments. Only what Dojin decided she needed to know to understand why Park Junho would not be a problem going forward. He used the phrase handled internally. He chose those 2 words carefully. They were accurate. They were complete. They required nothing else. She was in Celine's kitchen when he told her. She stood still and thought about what those words meant, about what Kang Chi had looked like when he said them, about the crouching in the kitchen and the quiet agreement to her conditions, and the 34 years of a man built one way, standing in a borrowed apartment learning to be another. She'd always known what he was. Sarah had told her. Not to frighten her, but because Sarah believed in accurate information. But knowing is one thing. Understanding, when you finally see the shape of it clearly, is another. She was shaken. She wouldn't pretend otherwise. Not to herself. But she didn't close the door either. The poetry anthology was slim, pale blue cover, Korean characters on the spine. She'd bought it secondhand 3 months after Sarah died. The pages had warped slightly from 2 years of being carried through changes of address and season. The letter was inside the back cover. A cream envelope. Sarah's small, precise handwriting on the front. For Kang Chi, when the time is right. You will know. Amanda had carried it through every move, every difficult month. Every morning she woke up and chose again to keep her promise. She told him it existed on a Thursday evening, Hana already asleep. The city going dark outside the window. She told him Sarah's instruction. She watched his face. Then she took the envelope from her jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. I'm going to read it to you, Amanda said. Not because you couldn't read it yourself, because Sarah wrote it to be heard. He looked at the envelope, then at her. He nodded once. She opened it. Kang Chi. I've tried to write this letter many times. I've never been satisfied with any version. I think that means I should stop trying to make it perfect and just make it honest. I left without telling you because I was afraid. Not of you. I need you to understand that. I was afraid of what I saw in you that you hadn't seen in yourself yet. A man who could be extraordinary. Who had the intelligence, the depth, the capacity for it. But who was still, when I left, choosing the easier version of himself. The version that didn't have to feel things. The version that turned everything soft into something hard before it could get close. I was afraid that if I stayed, if I told you about the child, you would love her that same way. Through glass, at a distance. And she can't have a father who loves her from behind glass. She deserves someone who holds her without armor. She deserves someone who would crouch down to her level and look her in the eye. I don't know if you're that person yet. I'm writing this to the possibility of you. The version of you I always believed was underneath everything you'd built on top of yourself. If Amanda is reading this to you, then you found them. And if you found them, something in you is already different from the man I knew. Because the man I knew would have sent other people. Her name is Hana. She has your way of going completely still when she's thinking. She has your eyes and your stubbornness, and something I hope she got from neither of us. An easiness with the world. A willingness to reach toward people without calculating the risk first. Keep that in her. Whatever you do, keep that in her. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I know I made the right choice for her. But I'm still sorry for you. For the time you lost. For the things a father should be present for that you weren't present for because I made a decision without you. I carry that. I loved you. In the impractical, inconvenient way that people love things that aren't quite safe for them. I don't regret any of it. What I regret is only that I didn't have more time to see what you were going to become. I didn't keep her from him out of hatred. I kept her from him until he was worth knowing her. Sarah Amanda folded the letter. The kitchen was completely quiet. The clock on the wall kept moving. Outside, a car passed somewhere below, and then the quiet came back, heavier than before. She didn't look at him right away. She looked at the folded letter in her hands. She thought about Sarah writing it in those last weeks. The small, precise handwriting she used for things that mattered. She held that image for a moment. Then she looked up. Kangchi was looking at the table. His hands were flat on it, but different now. Not controlled, just anchored. Like the surface was the thing keeping him in the room. His jaw was set. The mask was still there. But something was happening behind it that the mask was no longer big enough to cover. He didn't speak for a very long time. Then, was she right? Different voice. The one underneath all the other voices. The one without its posture up. Was she right? Am I worth knowing her now? Amanda looked at him across the small table. She thought about the fire, the doorway, his step forward, and then the stop. Not because she'd stopped him, because something in him had. Some place in him that hadn't been fully armored over yet. She thought about the conditions and his immediate agreement, the crouching, the rabbit. She folded the letter one more time and placed it on the table between them. I don't know yet, she said, but you stopped. That night, at the fire, you stopped. She paused. That's where it starts. 3 weeks is not a long time to learn something you've spent 34 years not knowing how to do. Kang-chi came twice a week. Always when Amanda said to. Always alone. He sat in the kitchen while Hana went about the serious business of her days. The organizing, the picture books, the long detailed conversations with Toki that followed their own internal logic and needed no adult input. He watched. When she spoke to him directly, he listened. He asked almost nothing. He didn't try to move faster. Amanda had braced for it. The slow erosion of her conditions, the drift of a man used to controlling outcomes toward controlling this one. It didn't come. He sat. He waited. He watched Hana the way you watch something you're still trying to understand, you're allowed to want. Here is what Amanda noticed, without saying it. The more careful he was, the more certain he already was. Men like him didn't move slowly unless they'd already decided where they were going. She kept watching. The rabbit came back on a morning 4 weeks in. He arrived at the usual time and crouched at the door because Hana had heard the knock and come running, which she'd started doing. He held Taki out at her eye level. The ears were restored. Different fabric at the tips, slightly lighter in color, but even and intact and properly shaped. The melted eye had been replaced. New button, matched as closely as it could be. Hana took the rabbit with both hands. She turned him slowly, checked the ears, pressed the nose, turned him over. Then she looked at Kang-chi. You fixed Toki. Someone fixed Toki, he said. I just brought him back. Hana considered this. The distinction seemed to matter to her. She sat with it the way she sat with things that required real thought. Then she held the rabbit out and placed him into Kang-chi's hands, not offering him for inspection. Giving him. On purpose. With the full intention of a child who has made a real decision. You keep him, she said. Toki likes you. Amanda's hand went over her mouth. She was standing in the kitchen doorway and she stood there with her hand pressed over her mouth, and she watched Kang-chi look down at the rabbit in his hands. The repaired ears, the matched button eye, this small damaged thing that had been brought back toward wholeness. And she watched something happen in him that she didn't have a name for and didn't need one. Hana had already turned back to her picture book. She settled on her chair and opened to the middle and began moving her finger along the lines with the deep concentration of someone not quite reading, but completely committed to the act of almost reading. She didn't look up. She said it the way she said most things. Simply. Without ceremony. As a fact that was obvious and needed no special delivery. Appa. The room stopped. Nothing fell. No one moved suddenly. The clock kept going and the city outside kept going, and Hana kept moving her finger along her book as if she had said something completely ordinary, which, to her, She had. Kang-chi looked up from the rabbit and found Amanda across the room. She was already looking at him, her hand still at her mouth, her eyes doing something that had nothing to do with composure and everything to do with 2 years of a promise and the moment it arrived. Neither of them spoke. Hana turned a page. He didn't tell her he was going to rebuild the shop. He asked. He came alone on a morning 3 weeks later and stood in the kitchen and said, "I want to rebuild Seoul Kitchen. Same location. The expansion project can be redesigned." He paused. "I'm asking if that's what you want." Amanda looked at him. She'd thought about this. What accepting would mean. Whether a rebuilt shop was something she could walk into every morning without feeling the weight of it. She thought about it from every angle, with Hana's future as the point she always oriented herself around. "Yes," she said. He nodded. "That difference matters," she said. "That you asked." He looked at her steadily. "I know." She believed him. The rebuilding took 6 weeks. Amanda didn't watch it happen. She had enough to carry without standing across the street measuring her feelings about a construction site. But Do-jun sent photographs at each stage, which she hadn't asked for, and which she suspected Kang-chi hadn't officially authorized. She looked at everyone before she went to sleep. Seoul Kitchen reopened on a cold Tuesday morning, the kind of cold that arrives overnight and makes the whole city feel like it's starting over. The sign was the same. She'd kept a photograph on her phone, taken on a slow afternoon 2 years ago when the light was right. And she'd given it to the sign maker and told him to reproduce it exactly. Same hand-lettered characters. Same slight imperfection in the curve of the second Korean character. The one she'd painted herself because she was a better cook than a painter. She told him to keep the imperfection. He had. She stood inside in the blue dress and white apron and touched the new counter. Same oak. Same dimensions. Because she'd kept those measurements in a notebook that survived. The fire in her jacket pocket. And she breathed in new wood and fresh paint, and underneath it, already, food smells beginning to move through from the kitchen where she'd been since 5 in the morning. Hana was at the corner table with Toki. Amanda unlocked the front door and turned the sign. She looked across the street. Kang-chi was there. Dark jacket, hands in his pockets, standing on the opposite pavement in the morning cold. Looking at the sign. Not moving toward the door. She understood it. Not as a wound. Not as a distance. As a correctness. He had asked and she had said yes and he had built it, and now he was standing across the street because some thresholds still need an invitation, and a man who observed almost no thresholds anymore, the ones he still kept, were the ones that counted. Then the door behind her opened and small feet hit the pavement at speed. "Appa! Appa, come see?" Hana in the pink coat, Toki under one arm, the other arm outstretched and already reaching. She crossed the pavement and grabbed his hand with the complete confidence of someone who has never once considered that the hand might not be there. And she pulled, with all the force of a 2-year-old who has decided something is going to happen. He let himself be pulled. He came across the street with her hand in his. Stopped at the threshold, the sign above the door. The smell of food moving out into the cold morning air. Amanda in the doorway in the blue dress and the white apron. She was smiling. Not the careful one. Not the one she used when she needed to look fine. This one reached her eyes. This one had warmth in it that wasn't managed or performed. He stopped. "I'm not the man Sarah hoped I'd be yet," he said. Amanda looked at him, at the hand holding Hana's hand, at the repaired rabbit under Hana's arm, at the man standing at the threshold of the thing he had burned and then been allowed to help rebuild. She stepped aside. "Then keep going," she said. He came in. Hana immediately dropped his hand and ran back to the corner table and climbed onto her chair and resumed her briefing to Toki, who had apparently been waiting and had much to be caught up on. Kang-chi stood just inside the door and looked at the shop, the oak counter, the new sign, the kitchen doorway, through which Amanda had already disappeared. The sounds of the morning beginning again. The particular music of a kitchen that knows what it's doing. He moved to the counter, rested his hands on the oak, watched her through the pass-through, the efficiency of someone who loves what they do, the reflex of a woman who turns once to check on the corner table, automatic as breathing, before turning back to the stove. Outside, the city moved through its Tuesday. People passed the window. The cold stayed sharp. The sky was the pale gray of a morning thinking about becoming something better. At the corner table, Hannah finished her briefing and picked up a red crayon and began drawing something with great concentration. Toki sat propped against her cup, watching. She held the drawing up without looking away from the page. "For Appa," she said. She set it back down and kept drawing. Kang Chi looked at the paper she'd put on the counter in front of him. Red crayon. Uneven lines. Something with a door in it. Or what might be a door? He looked at it for a moment. Then he picked it up carefully and folded it once, and put it in the inside pocket of his jacket, against his chest. Amanda didn't see him do it. She was already back at the stove, moving through the morning, doing what she'd always done. The city hummed outside. The smell of food filled the room. And Hannah kept drawing. If this story touched something in you, press the like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the most powerful thing in the world is not money, and it's not fear. It's a promise kept. It's a child who reaches for you, without hesitation. It's a door held open by someone who had every reason to close it. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. We bring you stories like this every day. Stories about people who find each other in the most impossible circumstances and somehow, against everything, choose to stay. And drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. I would love to say hello to you. Just to know how far our story is traveling, and whose heart it is finding along the way. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next one.